In the late 1980s, the United States Navy did something it hadn't done at that scale since the Second World War. It took almost a dozen oil tankers that belonged to Kuwait, painted American flags on the side of them, and personally escorted them, one convoy at a time, warships in front, warships behind, through a narrow channel at the mouth of the Persian Gulf. Why? Because Iran was attacking those tankers and the world simply could not afford for that oil to stop moving. They called it Operation Earnest Will. Before it was over, one of the American warships guarding those convoys struck an Iranian mine, and the U.S. Navy struck back in the largest surface battle it had fought in 40 years. Now, here's the part that should make the hair stand up on your arm this morning. All of that happened in the exact same stretch of water that is sitting at the top of your news feed today. Same choke point, same country, same escorted tankers. Welcome to Invest AI Savvy, where AI powers smart investing. Welcome to Thursday, June 4th, 2026. Sometimes history repeats itself, and that's sure what it looks like right now. Let's do something more useful than panic. Let's try to understand it. Here's the overnight picture, and the word for it is contradiction. Oil pulled back a little this morning as traders chose to read some hope into the on-again, off-again diplomacy between the United States and Iran. But pulled back a little is hiding the real story because oil is still camped out near $100 a barrel, a neighborhood it hasn't lived in for years. And the reason is that the Strait of Hormuz has been close to a standstill for weeks. Tankers aren't moving the way they used to. That's not a forecast, that's happening right now. And overnight, the fragile ceasefire got tested again with reports of Iranian drones striking an airport in Kuwait. At the same time, back here in Washington, the House passed a resolution pushing back on the Trump administration's authority to keep up military operations against Iran. So you've got a de-escalation headline and an escalation headline landing in the same news cycle, sometimes in the same hour. That push and pull is the entire mood of this market today. Now, here's the wrinkle that catches people off guard. This isn't only an oil story. Technology is wobbling too. Broadcom delivered a soft outlook and it's dragging the big chip names lower with a couple of other heavyweight names sliding alongside with it. So the market is being pulled apart from two directions at once. A geopolitical engine pushing energy and fear up, and a tech engine pulling the largest index components down. When those two forces collide, you get a choppy, confusing tape, and that's exactly what you're looking at this morning. So here's what I find genuinely fascinating. On a morning when every conversation in finance is about Iran, oil, and the Hormuz Strait, the single strongest signal the BuzzPulse system surfaced overnight has nothing to do with any of it. The signal of the day is ELF, E-L-F, ELF Beauty, a mid-cap cosmetic company, not energy, not defense, not a war trade in any form. Now, here's why that's worth attention. When one giant story is driving the market, most of what moves is just an echo. Oil names move because oil moves. Defense names move because the conflict moves them. That tells you about the headline, but not the company. But ELF is a beauty company. It doesn't pump oil. It doesn't ship through that strait. A drone over Kuwait doesn't sell a single tube of mascara. So when a cosmetic name lights up on the same morning, the whole market is captive to a war in the Persian Gulf. You can't wave it off as an echo because the headline has nothing to do with it. Now, honestly, we don't have the full catalyst nailed down yet, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. But a name marching to its own drum on a day like this earns a closer look. So we're going to watch ELF. We're not going to fall in love with it. There's a difference, and that difference is what keeps you solvent. And here's something most people get exactly backwards. On a fearful, headline-dominated morning like this one, the traps don't always get quieter. They get louder. Chaos is camouflage. When the entire market is staring at the Strait of Hormuz, that's the perfect moment for the low price, low flow pump and dump names to go to work because nobody's watching the side door. So let me hand you a rule you can keep for life. A dramatic move in a tiny, cheap stock with no real story behind it is not an opportunity. It's bait. And the tell is always the same: a flashy looking surge sitting on top of a catalyst that turns out to be absolutely nothing. Just noise that found a microphone dressed up to look like a breakout. The system flags those names on purpose, and it flags them so you can step around them, not chase them. On a distracting, emotional morning, that discipline matters more than usual, not less. BuzzPulse points out suspicious activity. The point is to show you trades that might put you in jeopardy while everyone else is looking the other way. Now is the part of the show where I track yesterday's signal in public. And yesterday we flagged BYND, and I was clear on camera that it was a speculative setup. The system tagged it that way by design, so you knew exactly what you were looking at going in. That's the discipline working not against you, but for you. The trade is still live on the clock, and the moment the system closes it out, I'll bring the result straight back to this chair and call it exactly as it lands. Every signal gets followed all the way through, in the open, on the record. That's what separates a system you can trust from a guy that's just shouting tickers. Here's a concept I want you to carry out of today, and it ties straight back to the story I opened with. It's called the geopolitical risk premium. When a choke point like Hormuz is under threat, oil doesn't wait for the supply to actually disappear before it climbs. It climbs on the fear that the supply might disappear. That extra price stacked on top of what the fundamentals alone would justify, that's the premium. Think of it as a fear tax the whole world pays at the pump. But here's the lesson the 1980s teaches us, and it's the part that almost nobody remembers. Back during that tanker war, with real warships and real mines and real escorted convoys in that same water, oil didn't actually spike the way you'd expect. Why not? Because the world was drowning in oil at the time. There was a glut, and when supply is abundant, fear loses that tug of war to fundamentals. The premium showed up, but it stayed small because there was a cushion underneath it. Now look at today. There's no glut cushioning the blow this time. Supply is tighter, the Strait of Hormuz is genuinely disrupted, and so the very same kind of fear is translating into real, painful price near $100. Same fear, completely different outcome because the backdrop is different. That's the whole lesson. The risk premium is always a tug of war between fear and fundamentals, and the winner depends entirely on the cushion underneath. So what do you actually do with that? You stop trying to predict the headline. You can't predict a drone strike. You can't predict a social media post from a head of state. Add to that a jobs report tomorrow morning, an OPEC meeting this Sunday, and inflation data a week out, and you've got a stretch of days where any single event can reprice this market in under an hour. When risk stacks up like that, the smart move is never to predict smarter. It's to manage your size, respect the calendar, and keep your risk honest going into the weekend. You control your exposure. You'll never be able to control the headline. So here's where we stand this morning. The market is caught between a war premium that refuses to quit and a tech sector that's stumbling, with a jobs report tomorrow morning that's going to shove everything around no matter what it says. And in the middle of all that noise, one name, ELF, is quietly doing its own thing away from the crowd, and we're going to keep an eye on exactly where it goes. The system locks the signal this morning, and the clock starts now. The next 48 hours tell the story, jobs report and all. And the moment that window closes this weekend, I'm back in this chair to tell you exactly what happened, win or lose. That's the contract. Nearly 40 years ago, this same water, the Hormuz Strait, was teaching investors that a choke point is a slow burn, not a single bad day. And it's still teaching that lesson this morning if you're willing to learn it instead of fear it. I'm Ken Carpenter. This is Invest AI Savvy, and that's the way it is.